Good afternoon, I'm the 100 Proof News Hound, and we're here with another episode of the 100 Years and More Show. Today's episode's really got it all. You're going to see a tale of the early automotive industry. Architecture, architects, skyscrapers, personal rivalries, and enduring legacies. You're going to see how a man accumulated immense wealth and then used that immense personal wealth to design and build one of the greatest buildings ever built in America. I'm talking about Walter P. Chrysler, the Chrysler Building, and the race to 1,000 feet. You're going to see how fast things moved in the early 20th century in the automotive industry. You're going to see how a man went from total obscurity to the pinnacle of industry in about 6 years. And after he'd made immense wealth in the automotive industry, how he transmuted himself into architecture and design, constructing probably the most iconic building in America. And then when he had accomplished everything he wanted to in life, how he just cashed in his chips, retired, and spent time with his family. A win-win all around. Now, who was this man, and where did he come from? Well, we've been saying in this series of shows that if you wanted something done in the late 19th century, you had to be in the American Midwest. Well, he's a little further afield. He's born in the West, in Wamega, Kansas, 1875. And you know who else was in Kansas in the 1870s? Wild Bill Hickok. So that's how far Walter P. Chrysler came, from Wild Bill Hickok to the chairman and president of Chrysler Motors. His father was even a little further afield. His father was born in Chatham, Ontario. That's a little town about 50 miles down the 401 from the new Gordie Howe Bridge that connects Detroit with Windsor, Ontario. His father was a railroad man. He went out west and joined the Union Pacific as an engineer. You don't get more railroady than that. Walter decided to follow in his father's footsteps, but first he had to get a good education. So did he go to Harvard? Did he go to Yale? Nah, he kind of did a Jethro Bodine, getting a certificate of mechanical engineering from the International Correspondence School of Scranton, Pennsylvania. That allowed him to work on steam locomotives, and he became a machinist and railroad mechanic. He worked his way up as a foreman, then a supervisor, then a superintendent, and eventually a plant manager. Well, here's the first notation in a newspaper article ever to mention Walter P. Chrysler. It's the Daily Mail of Wellington, Kansas, October 20th, 1898, under the heading Railroad Notes. And it says, Walter P. Chrysler left last night for Ellis to accept his new position in the UP shops there. That would be the Union Pacific. So he's going to go around, bounce around from railroad to railroad, working in the various repair shops across America. In the meantime, though, he does manage to get married. We got the article here from Ellis Review Headlight, Ellis, Kansas. That's the name of the newspaper. Friday, June 7th, 1901. It says here that he was married to Della V. Forker, Forker. And, well, he would spend the rest of his life with Della. It's noted, though, in the article that the groom is an Ellis boy, but recently removed to Salt Lake City, where he has a good position in the Rio Grande Western shops. So he's moved as far afield as Utah. But he's a Rolling Stone, and by 1909, it's noted in the Ellis Review Headlight of Ellis, Kansas, that Walter P. Chrysler is now the assistant superintendent of, and this is the railroad, MP&M CGWR&R, which, as far as I can tell, is the Missouri Pacific and Chicago Great Western Railway. And it's noted that Mr. Chrysler has resigned his position with the Great Western to accept the position with the American Locomotive Works, which is outside of Pittsburgh. Walter's many friends here will be glad to hear of his success. And this was probably the biggest moment of his life, whether he knew it or not, because he comes east, or at least east as far as Pittsburgh, and he's now working in one of the largest, and managing one of the largest locomotive repair shops in America. When he's there, he runs into a fellow named James Storrow. Now, who's James Storrow? He's a banker who sits on the board of directors of the American Locomotive Company. And he asks him, have you ever thought of going into automobiles? Now, Chrysler's a real auto enthusiast. He's owned a car for 4 or 5 years. He does his own repair work and maintenance, but he never thought of getting into that as a career. But Storrow thinks he'd be good for the job, and he arranges a meeting with Charles Nash, who's the fellow running Buick at the time. So here we are in 1913. Buick's part of General Motors. General Motors had been founded by William C. Durant, who you can see in one of our other episodes. But Durant had been tossed in 1911 by the board of directors and the banks because he was too much of a wild card. He got the company into debt, even though they had incredible sales. He just expanded too fast, and he loses control of the company. But they got to bring in good guys, and Chrysler's been identified as one of those potential good guys. So they need a production manager to run the factory in Flint. The Buick factory's always been in Flint, and he's offered a salary of $6,000 a year, which about $180,000 in today's dollar, today's dollars. He can't turn it down, so off he goes to Flint. He settles into the automotive industries, and there's a series of articles in the Flint Journal covering what Walter's doing over the next few years. Well, here we are. Headline: New Buick gets severe mud test and trip to Chicago, covered over 600 miles with Walter L. Marr at the wheel. And Walter P. Chrysler is one of the passengers. It says here, we came all the way from Battle Creek through mud anywhere from 2 to 9 inches deep. We went by the way of Lansing, and we're in Battle Creek in about 5 hours running. You'd be there in under an hour today. But back then, what you have to realize is that while city streets were paved with paving stones, any city-to-city stuff, so even like a major route from like Detroit to Chicago, is just dirt roads or at best gravel roads. And so you're just always up to your hubcaps in mud and debris. There's another article here that says from the Hutchinson Gazette, his old stomping grounds of Hutchinson, Kansas, August 24th, 1913. Specially built car for Dr. G.R. Gage. And the gist of the article is that Dr. Gage is having a one-of-kind special automobile built by Buick by his friend Walter P. Chrysler. What's important in the article, it says here, Walter P. Chrysler, known as the works manager of the Buick Automobile Company, the biggest automobile plant in the world. And it was by that point in time. It's before Henry Ford had done his Dearborn Works, his Zug Island stuff. At this point in time, he's now managing the largest automobile plant in the world and doing it very successfully. It's doing it so well that, according to the Battle Creek Journal of November 23rd, 1915, Buick plans to double capacity of its Flint plant. It says here plans are underway for doubling the production of the Buick Motor Company in the next 8 months. This will necessarily mean the doubling of the production of several accessory plants here and an increase of several thousand men in the workforce. You can't stress enough what kind of a boom town Detroit was in the early 20th century. It really was the Silicon Valley of America at that time. It's noted also that works manager Walter P. Chrysler announced at the same time that the contracts for $500,000 worth of new factory buildings would be started this week. They need people, they need housing, they need factories. All kinds of construction is going on in the Flint, Detroit area in the 19-teens. And Walter P. Chrysler gets involved in that, separate and apart from his work at Buick. He incorporates another company that basically is a land development company, and he gains some real experience in that time period in real estate, which is going to come into play in the 1920s in New York. Now, he's on a 3-year contract from 1913 to 1916 with the Buick Company. But in 1916, William C. Durant, through one of the great Wall Street finagles of all time, comes back into control of General Motors. He takes over control of General Motors, and William Durant is basically a wild card. So he's a boomer bust kind of guy, and that doesn't sit well with Walter P. Chrysler, who's also was tight with the old board of directors of General Motors, the bankers. So he resigns. But Durant feels he can't lose a person of the quality of Walter P. Chrysler. So he makes him an offer, and it's really a crazy offer. Remember, this is a man who's making $200,000 a year doing work, managing the Buick factory. All of a sudden, this is the proposal. He's going to pay $300,000. I'm doing the conversions into today's dollars. $300,000 a month. For 3 years, with a $15 million stock option at the end of each year. He gets the right to purchase $15 million in stock at the end of each year. And he's signing this for a 3-year deal. He also gives him full control of Buick, answerable only to Durant. Chrysler can't believe it. He asks him to repeat the offer because it makes no sense. He repeats it and he immediately accepts. Here's the headline, the Flint Journal, Wednesday, June 21, 1916. Larger production aim of Chrysler, new Buick head. Chrysler's now the head of Buick, running the whole company here. It says here, new office building for benefit of employees and enlargement of plant among plans. Again, the construction, hand in hand with the boom of the Buick Company, is the need for construction of offices and industrial capacity, which gives him more experience in the construction field. He's an innovative man. While he may be conservative in his financial dealings, Walter P. Chrysler is an innovative man. Here's an article that I bet you'll think is 60 years ahead of its time. If you thought automation came into the automobile industry only in the 1880s and 90s, well, think again. It's the Morning Tribune of Los Angeles, March 25th, 1917. Headline, automatic machinery of great speed and marvelous accuracy brings down cost of cars. For factory efficiency, do away with the human element wherever possible, says Walter P. Chrysler, president of the Buick Motor Company, who's in Los Angeles on important business. It says here, the human element is uncertain and uncertainty has no place in the modern factory of today. Mechanical fingers, which work with marvelous accuracy and efficiency, have replaced the less certain work of human fingers and have played a major part in the reducing of factory costs for Buick cars, which in turn means that the public gets more automobile value for their money. Automation in the 1920s. This is things like stamping out fenders as opposed to hammering them out by hand. Things are being automated and simplified, and they've reduced the labor component of the construction of a car to under $100 a car. But just because they're automating doesn't mean that they're going to get rid of everybody. Headline in the Oklahoman in Oklahoma City, February 16th, 1919. No cut in wages, says Buick chief. Year of prosperity ahead, predicts Chrysler. Walter P. Chrysler, president of the Buick Motor Company, in a recent address before the Flint Chamber of Commerce, stated that in spite of the fact that the average wage of the Buick plant, where 13,000 men are employed, was a lot of guys, 13,000, was the highest of any manufacturing plant in the state of Michigan, there would not be, as a result of the ending of the war, any reduction in wages, either now or at any time in the future. That's a pretty good guarantee. So he's running a plant that's selling as many cars as they can. He's employing as many people as he can. Everyone making as much money as they can. But that's not the end of what's in store for Walter P. Chrysler. Headline, the Flint Journal, April 3rd, 1919. Flint man takes charge of all General Motors plants. He's running the whole show now, completely. It's his business. It's his baby. It's 1990. He's cruising. And then something happens. Here we go. Salt Lake Herald, Sunday, November 23rd, 1919. No explanation for the recent resignation of Walter P. Chrysler, Vice President and General Manager of the General Motors Corporation, has been made known. Those who have followed the development of the General Motors Corporation have often referred to him as being responsible to as great an extent as any other official for the growth of the corporation. The news of his resignation was one of the biggest surprises of the year to the automobile world. He resigns his incredibly lucrative position with General Motors. Why? Well, because, as it says here in the Boston Globe, November 7th, 1999, it is understood that Mr. Chrysler intends to engage in business on his own account. He's going to business for himself. And will he have the money? Heck, will he have the money? He's made $30 million a year for the last 3 years. His stock options are now worth, in today's dollars, $300 million. And he rolls right into another great job. He's now seen as a guy, he's BlackRock before there was BlackRock. He's the kind of guy that can right the ship and make the changes that are necessary and change the fortunes of an industry. He's sought out by the Willis Company, Willis Overland. They'd go on to make Jeeps. Well, here, headline in the Detroit Free Press. Willis seeks to lead field. Walter P. Chrysler joins motor interests with plans for big production. Says here, Mr. Chrysler's headquarters will be in New York City, where he will be in close conjunction with Mr. Willis. He will devote himself immediately to the development of the large production plans of the various Willis companies for this year. So he's moving to New York, and this is a big thing in his life. He's going to New York. He's going to try to resurrect the Willis company here. But Walter P. Chrysler does not come cheap. He's guaranteed a salary of $1 million a year, which is the equivalent of $30 million a year for the next 2 years. He's established himself a baseline pay of $1 million a year, and that's a heck of a baseline. He builds an estate out on Long Island, kind of like the Great Gatsby, and he names it after his wife. You know, he reorganizes the company, he reduces the debt, gets it running in better shape, and then at the end of his 2-year contract, he leaves. And he leaves to go into an even more advantageous position here. There's another company that's in a bit of trouble here, and that's the Maxwell Company. They made an automobile manufacturer in the 1920s. It says here in the Detroit Free Press, June 3rd, 1921, Wilson named Maxwell head. New York banker elected chief of new company. Walter P. Chrysler heads board made up of manufacturers and financial men. Walter P. Chrysler is the chairman of the board of the board of directors, and T.H. Thomas is the controller. So he's now the chairman of the board of a struggling automotive company that he's going to change the company to pursue his own personal objectives. And the first thing he does is he makes his own automobile. And what do you think he calls it? How about a Chrysler? The new Chrysler 6 announced, according to the Free Press, January 6, 1924. Line includes 2 touring cars, roadsters, Brougham, and 2 sedans. So now he's actually, for the first time, making a Chrysler automobile. It's under the Maxwell head. Here's an ad. It's funny how much it's all about Walter P. Chrysler. I guess that was that was important back then, that personal branding. I guess it's kind of the Elon Musk thing. Here it is here, an ad in the Detroit Free Press, July 27th, 1924. A word from Walter P. Chrysler. It says here, the same engineering genius, which with the Chrysler has literally revolutionized practice and performance in the six-cylinder field, has now made the good Maxwell equally outstanding among the four-cylinder cars. And Chrysler goes on to state that his four-cylinder is the best, and you just have to buy it. In 1925, he completes the transformation, and the company is reorganized as the Chrysler Corporation. And in the next 2 years, they would add Plymouth and Dodge and become the Chrysler Corporation, and of course that we've all grown up with, and to a great extent, which still exists today somehow. Here's where we hear our stories. Here's the point where our story transmutes itself from one of automobile and fortunes to architecture. And that would be a good time to remind you that if you wait until the end, if you hang in here till the end, you'll experience our traditional themed cocktail. And today is a variation on the Manhattan, appropriately enough. Now, the development of the Chrysler Building comes like a shot out of the blue here. Here's the headline, Daily News in New York, October 17th, 1928. It says, Chrysler pays $20 million for paper tower. Why is it a paper tower? Because it doesn't exist. He's buying a concept. And $20 million, remember, is $600 million. And what's he doing? What's he buying here? The greatest addition to the New York magnificent skyline will soon rise into the clouds if the plans of Walter P. Chrysler, automobile manufacturer, announced yesterday are realized. A 68-story building will go up on the east front block of Lexington Avenue between 42nd and 43rd Streets. Yesterday, Chrysler purchased the building, which so far exists only on paper, from former State Senator William H. Reynolds at a cost of $20 million. And Reynolds made $2.5 million on the flip in the Woolworth building. And it's announced that William Van Allen will be the architect. It says here the tower will extend 16 feet higher than the then tallest building. Another article that we must read in conjunction with this, then we'll get into some explanation. Chrysler building to top Woolworth. The Woolworth building is soon to be surpassed. Walter Chrysler, automobile magnate, yesterday purchased a 66-year lease for a tract on the east side of Lexington Avenue. On it, he will erect a $14 million 68-story building, which will be 808 feet high. Note it here. The venture is a personal one, Chrysler said, in which the automobile company bearing his name has no interest. He's using his personal funds to build a building named after himself in Midtown Manhattan. It's going to be the tallest building in the world. Now, there's a little bit to unpack out of those two articles. One of the things you should know is that the land under the Chrysler Building today is not owned by the Chrysler Building. They lease the land, and it's leased from the Cooper Union for the Advancement of Science and Arts. It's a school, and they lease it. And because it's a school and it's a not-profit, the Chrysler Building does not pay property tax to the city of New York. Never has. If that allows Cooper Union to charge exorbitant rent instead, because they know they're getting a cut because they don't have to pay the property tax. But anyways, he's buying air. He's just buying the right to build a building on land he does not own. It's a 67-year lease, which has since subsequently been renewed. Now, the architect is specified as William Van Allen. He's a respected but not well-known architect. He's never built a skyscraper before. He's built some 5- and 6-story restaurant buildings and office buildings, but nothing on this scale whatsoever. And one thing that's very important is he used to be partners with another architect called H. Craig Severance, and he's important to the story because they split acrimoniously in 1924, and as fate would have it, while Van Allen is attached to our project here at the Chrysler Building, Severance gets attached to a new building at 40 Wall Street, the Bank of Manhattan building. They're similar in design. The buildings are only a few blocks apart, similar in design, and according to the plans, depending on which set of plans you're looking at, they're going to be almost the exact same height. One could be taller than the other could be taller than the one, and both of them will be taller than the Woolworth building, be the tallest building in the world. But which one will actually be the tallest building in the world? We have a nice picture of the Bank of Manhattan building, hopefully on your screen right now. And you can see the similarities in shape and design to the Chrysler Building. Now, the race to the sky, the race to 1,000 feet, as I've called it, becomes a popular piece of culture in this city of New York in 1929, 1930. Here's an ad in the Daily News, March 6, 1929. Hey, Bill, I don't know which cigarette this one is, but it sure gets my vote. Bill McCord of Post & McCord Steel Contractors for the new Chrysler Building holds cigarette tests with 94 workers. They tested the blind taste test of 4 cigarettes with 94 workers, and 73% said they liked the old gold cigarettes the best. And I love the little saying down in the corner of the ad, not a cough in a carload. Can you imagine? Not a cough in a carload. No, just cancer and emphysema. Now, these buildings are going up simultaneously a few blocks apart, and shortly thereafter, the Empire State Building is also going to go up in the same neighborhood. What makes the construction of all these three buildings amazing? It's the speed and precision of the construction. To get the material to the job site requires a military-like organization. The steel, the girders are coming from the Bethlehem Steel Works in Pennsylvania. They're coming in on dedicated rail lines. They're moved into position with modern machinery. And once the girders begin being constructed and put together, they move at breakneck pace. They're constructing 4 floors a week. They're putting up 4 girdered floors a week. And in the case of the Chrysler Building is substantially made of brick. There are bricklayers, dozens and dozens, following the girders up the building, also completing 4 floors a week. And when the building is finally completely enveloped by brick, you still have to finish the interior. They have to lay miles and miles of electrical cable and thousands of feet of plumbing pipes. And then they have to finish, once that's done, they have to plaster and finish 1.2 million square feet of interior space. And you know how long it takes them to do it? 11 months. They do it in less than a year. By contrast, it took 13 years to design and build One World Trade Center after 9/11. But they didn't have to go through the hoops and the regulations and the inspectors that a modern building has to. And amazingly enough, in the entire construction of the Chrysler Building, nobody died, and Walter Chrysler was extremely proud of that. Now they're racing. The two architects are racing. 40 Wall Street and the Chrysler Building are racing for the sky. Who gets there first? Well, here's the answer. It's the New York Daily News, Monday, November 25th, 1929. The question of high buildings. News was broken on November 18th that the Chrysler Building at 42nd and Lexington Avenue had beaten the world's record of the Bank of Manhattan Building at 40 Wall Street by some 105 feet. The Bank of Manhattan Building was finished a month before, and it stood 927 feet. It didn't look like the Chrysler Building was going to top it until they pulled, basically a rabbit out of their hat. It says here, they used the trick. The trick was accomplished by an ingenious engineering device called the steel vertex. Constructed inside the elevator shaft, the vertex was lifted through the top of the Chrysler Tower, adding 12 stories and a flagpole plus a flag. So falls the glory of the Eiffel Tower in Paris, hitherto the world's tallest man-made structure. Its height is 1,000 feet, which the Chrysler Building bettered by 46. So they shoved a tower up through the middle of the building and attained a full height of 1,046 feet. And we actually have a picture of the vertex system here showing exactly how it was done. Seems like cheating, but all's fair in love and architecture. We also have a nice picture of the blueprint of the Chrysler Building, where you can see in clear detail the stainless steel crowning tower. Now, the Chrysler Building didn't always have to look like that. There were actually as many as 4 different versions of the exterior of the building. The first one that they had thought of was going to have a dome on it, similar to St. Paul's Cathedral. Then there was sort of a neoclassical version that they thought of. The last 2 versions that were proposed both had the stainless steel crown, but only the one that was actually constructed had the vertex system to get the total height of the building over 1,000 feet. Chrysler thought that would be great for publicity, which in fact it was. And as a result of his aggressive building of the tallest building in the world, Walter P. Chrysler was named Time Magazine's Man of the Year for 1929. But a building's just a building. What makes the Chrysler Building so memorable? Well, in my opinion, it's their adherence to Art Deco design and the boldness to remain faithful to that design in every aspect of construction for both the interior and the exterior. The building shines. It just glows, and that's due to a new product in 1929, a material called Nerosta. It's a stainless steel, but a stainless steel that really is stainless. It's called an 18-8 stainless steel, meaning that it's 18% chromium, 8% nickel, 74% stainless steel, and it just doesn't corrode. The building, I believe, has only been cleaned 1 time in its near 100-year history. It's really the decorative elements that set it apart for me. It's the use of American eagles on the 61st floor on each of the corners to act as they're beyond gargoyles. They're the most impressive architectural components that I've seen on any building in my experience. They also reproduced the 1929 Chrysler hood ornament to serve as true gargoyles on the 31st floor along each corner, and then they reproduced hubcaps and fender design in brick to act as a frieze along the whole 31st floor with those hood ornament gargoyles mounted in the corners. The interior was also a celebration of the Art Deco style. They used the Narosta stainless steel throughout, along with African red granite, Belgian blue marble, and Mexican amber onyx. And all the details throughout the building, interior and exterior, were consistent with Art Deco design. They didn't fail at once, and it's that continuity that pulls the whole building together. But a building's got to make money. If your building doesn't have tenants and doesn't make money, it won't make sense, and it'll soon be pulled down. Here's an article, April 12th, 1930. Tallest building opens on Tuesday. A 77-story Chrysler building, and it's 77 stories because of the buildings of the floors in the tower. Will be ready for inspection by April 15th, according to an announcement made yesterday by Walter P. Chrysler, president of the W.P. Chrysler Building Corporation. Formal opening of the building will be observed later when 111 tenants or more, according to present rentals, will be occupying the space of the new structure. It says here the tower, which is expected to be one of the sites of New York, will not be open until later. There would ultimately be an observation deck on the tower, which they would charge 50 cents to see. And of the tenants, the largest tenant when the building opens was Texaco Oil, which rented 14 floors. While the building wasn't named after the Chrysler Motor Company, but after Walter P. Chrysler, he wasn't averse to using it for cross-promotion. It says here, Motor Show in Chrysler Tower to open on the same date, May 27th, 1930. It's going to open up first day of the auto show. And there was, in fact, while there were no offices of Chrysler in the building initially, other than Walter's offices, there was a section set aside on the second floor of the lobby to display Chrysler product and to be a showroom for a dealership. And that dealership remained in there until the 1960s. Another thing, they had some innovative ideas here. They had a thing called the Cloud Club. We're going to be a private men's only at the top of the building. It says Cloud Club leases three floors of Chrysler Building. They were going to lease the 67th through 69th floor. And the Cloud Club opened in July 1930, had 300 members, all men. Most were executives of Texaco. There was also they had a separate Texaco dining room. There was a separate Chrysler dining room. And the 66th and 67th floors were connected by a Renaissance-style marble bronze staircase. There was a dark wood paneled bar on the 67th floor. It was quite the operation, and it remained in operation until Texaco left the building to move to the country out in the county, Westchester County, in 1977. The club officially closed in 1979, and it has not reopened. Now, Chrysler himself had a home in the clouds. It says here in the New York Daily News, April 21, 1930. Walter P. Chrysler has announced that he will have an apartment on the 58th, 59th, and 60th floors of the 77-story structure, which bears his name. On rainy days, the apartment will be above the clouds. Pretty cool for 1930. When the building opened, they aggressively marketed, and they got 70%. They got 70% occupancy, which not to the 95% that somebody would want now. 70% at the beginning of the Depression was quite good. The Empire State Building was burdened with only 15 to 20% occupancy throughout the 1930s. So, by comparison, the Chrysler Building was a sterling example of how to market a 1,000-foot skyscraper. When the reviews came out, they were mixed. The public loved it. Public has always loved the Chrysler Building, but the critics, such they were, about half of them thought it was too over the top. They didn't appreciate the full tied-in Art Deco design. Pretty much, though, everyone's come around since then, and the Chrysler Building, if there's no other building it wins every poll when either the public or architectural critics are polled about buildings of New York. It always comes in first place. Even when they're talking about buildings of America, it's never out of the top 10. One of the things but not everything ends well, let's say, in a project of this type. What's an amazing thing is that William Van Allen, who was the architect and in charge of the day-to-day construction of the building. He never had he never had a contract. He never reduced his agreement with Walter Chrysler to writing. When the building was completed, he had only been paid about $140,000 of what he thought should be an $865,000 fee. Now, amongst gentlemen at this level, this is the kind of problem that should be negotiated at one's private club. That should be over a port and make a mild suggestion, and perhaps work out something that's fair for everybody. But that's not what Van Allen did. He sued him. Van Allen sued him. Here's the article in the New York Daily News, June 18th, 1930. Architect claims big Chrysler fee. A mechanic's lien against the WP Chrysler Building Corporation and the Rayex Corporation was filed yesterday in the county clerk's office. It was declared that $725,000 of a fee of $865 was due William Van Allen for architectural services in connection with the Chrysler Building. Van Allen stated that he had prepared the plans and drawings for the building and supervised the construction, which he had. But he went about collecting his fee in the wrong way, and that really irritated the powers that be, the rich and mighty of New York City, that were the potential builders of future skyscrapers. Didn't want to work with Van Allen because they saw him to be difficult and just not gentlemanly. And Van Allen had to basically go into academia and become a teacher after this. He designed really only one great building, but it might just be the greatest building in the world. Some things do turn out nice, though, for people here, and I've included this just because it's so sweet. Here's the New York Daily News of January 5th, 1930. Nice photograph of, motor heiress weds before the entranced eyes of 1,000 guests representing the social, financial, and political powers of the world. Bernice Chrysler above, daughter of Walter P. Chrysler, motor magnate, yesterday married Edgar William Garbish, son of a country doctor who won national fame on the football field. He was a big shot college football star. Well, now he's just a big shot rich guy because she's one of the 4 children who are going to inherit all of this. Anyways, what happens to Walter P. Chrysler? Well, in 1936, at the age of 61, he retires from Chrysler Motors. He retires to his house at the Forker House out on his estate on Long Island. Unfortunately, his wife dies 2 years later in 1938, and he would die of a cerebral hemorrhage in 1940. Why did he build it? Why did he build this building? With his own money. Nobody else does stuff like that. Why did he do it? Well, he knew that his kids were going to be rich. There was no way of avoiding them being rich, but he wanted to give his family something that they had to be responsible for. And that did bring the family together and tie everyone together because they had this asset. They actually built there were actually a couple of annex buildings built adjacent to it, so it was sort of a complex of buildings when all 3 were sold in the early 1950s for $52 million, or the equivalent of about $1 billion today. But there's a modern point about the Chrysler Building that I've never seen discussed, but we're going to discuss it today, right now. And that's naming rights. Remember, he named this after himself. A major stadiums in the United States all involve naming rights, like SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles. And you know that it costs between $20 and $30 million a year for a company to put their name on a stadium? And I'm going to say that 2 buildings in New York City, the Chrysler Building and the Empire State Building, are far more well known than any individual stadium in America. If you were to put naming rights to those for those buildings up, I would assume they would easily obtain the $20 to $30 million that a silly SoFi Stadium is in Los Angeles. But they didn't have to pay anything. Chrysler never had to pay anything for that. Now, while it was named after Walter P. Chrysler, everybody assumed it was the Chrysler Automotive Company. And for almost 100 years, they've gotten free publicity. Not just free publicity, but $2 to $3 billion worth of free publicity. Now, Chrysler's gone through some rough times in the past, but I'd speculate that one of the reasons they're still with us today is that $20 to $30 million in free advertising that they've been getting year after year after year because of the Chrysler Building. Anyways, I've not heard anyone else. That's what we call around here an original thought. I've not heard anyone else argue that, but I'm pretty sure we're right about that. And that brings us to the question of who the heck names a building after themselves? Even the Woolworth Building was named after the company. It was to serve as their world headquarters. You know who does? Well, let me just tell you. You know that building, that 40 Wall Street building? The one that was the Manhattan Bank building, the one that went 927 feet? You know what that building's called today? The Trump Building. No, I'm not making that up. It's the Trump Building, not Trump Tower, but the Trump Building. He names buildings after himself. Probably should have known that. Well, we're ready now for our classic-themed cocktail. We'll end the day with a Manhattan skyscraper, an actual cocktail. It's a version of a Manhattan. It's 1.5 ounces of bourbon, 1 ounce of sweet vermouth, half an ounce of Amaro Montenegro, which is basically a bittersweet Italian liqueur, 4 dashes of chocolate bitters. You take all those ingredients, you put them over ice in a tall mixing glass, you spin it 30 to 40 times to get the proper dilution and temperature. Then you strain it into a chilled coupe glass. Coupe glass are our favorites. Those are the 1930s champagne glasses with the wide rim. You strain it into that, and you garnish it with a twist of orange. Make sure lots of the acid gets onto the top of the drink. And that's it, folks. Enjoy your Manhattan skyscraper. We'll be back next week with another episode of the 100 Years or More show. And remember, like and subscribe. It's important. We need those subscriptions to move the channel along. And I like doing these things. So we'll see you again next week. Take care, everybody.